Welcome to Marg seminar. आवाज आ रही? Okay. I'm so happy that you're here. It's Saturday morning, and in America it's not very good to invite anyone to start at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. I'm so happy that you're here. And if you're wondering that you have done any favor, it's not so. Because you had to be here. Because this is such a occasion, and behind the scene, behind this body and mind, there is some spirit that is really working behind the scene, and it couldn't help you but bring here. And in the same way, if the Marg team thinks that they have done something great by putting this seminar together, it's not that. I think this was something whose time had come. We are really the children of Mother Earth. This planet on which we live is our mother. I mean, there is no doubt about it. Mothers are very special. The man doesn't have that distinction. Man produces simply for namesake, father. Mother brings out a body, nourishes it, rears it, and all the life, even when the child becomes an old man, for the mother, that little child remains even then. So they're very special. In the same way, the Mother Earth is our mother, no doubt about it. The animals, plants, everyone, we are really using it, exploiting it, we don't realize it. And in this seminar today, you are going to hear from people from all the way, the spiritual side, and what we can do as our part to serve the society, and also the applied side. So with that, I'm going to invite Santji. Dr. Sant Gupta is a very well-known community leader here. He is the past president of the Durga Temple, very active in Vishwa Hindu Parishad. And it's very fortunate that he is also one of the very actively involved person in the Marg team. So welcome, Santji, and you take it.
Thank you. Now, again, once again, I welcome you all. So the way we will proceed today is that I will introduce the two chairs of this session, and they will in turn then introduce the speakers. We are starting a little late. We do want to finish on time at 5 p.m., and we also do not want to delay lunch. If you intrude into the lunch period, people get very unhappy with you. So that is a message to our chairs to make up for this time. Okay, so we have two chairs. Dr. Satya Prakash Agrawal. He's a social scientist with a brilliant academic record as well as notable professional achievement in India, United States, and the United Nations. He's a prolific writer, author of large number of books and research papers. His favorite theme has been Lokasamgraha, good for all, as the main message of the Gita, Ramayana, and Hindu scriptures, on which he has written extensively, and is relentless in his pursuit even in his 90s. I really wish that I'll be as good health-wise and mentally as he is at this age. As an honorary research associate at the Center of South Asian Studies, University of California, Berkeley, he has deeply been involved in the research on Lokasamgraha and ecology. Our other chair of this session is Dr. Shiva Subramanian. He is a professor of pediatrics and OB/GYN at Georgetown Medical School, Washington, D.C., and chief neonatal perinatal medicine, MedStar Georgetown University Hospital. He is a founder member of Sri Shiva Vishnu Temple, and I have always been very fortunate to collaborate with him for many activities, including interfaith, and it's just a joy to work with him. So Shiva, can you take it over from here and introduce our eminent speakers, and hopefully we can finish in sufficient time that we have some Q&A. Is Q&A planned as part of our sessions? We'll see how the time goes.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. This is indeed an important conference, and I really congratulate the Marg Foundation and the Hindu Temple to host this, to have this very important, and also from the multicultural, multi-faith, as well as various different perspectives, and with the focus on in terms of what Hinduism does it look at, in terms of this specific topic of sacred Mother Nature. And obviously it's very fashionable now to talk about, ecology, environment, and but I think it has been there in ancient traditions. The civilizations who have been there, who lived with Mother Nature all their lives for thousands of years. And some of the other traditions we'll also talk about later today. And so it is something in Hinduism. They have been focusing on this from the time that, they started for thousands of years ago. The living with nature, living with the environment, respecting, not alone just living, but respecting the nature, and was a very important. In fact, in anything that we do, if we bother the earth, even by planting something, we worship the land first, that we are disturbing you to be able to plant this, which could be beneficial. So it is something that it is not alone working with, living with, but also actually respecting and worshipping. And with that, you will have much better opportunity for the humanity to live longer and without it. So again, keeping in mind the time that you talked about, I'm going to start introducing our speakers for the day. We have been really lucky to be able to get very eminent speakers, and the first person that I will be inviting to give the keynote address is Swami Chidbrahmananda. He has been studying the Vedanta nearly 20 years. He joined the Ramakrishna Order of Monks in 1999 after being introduced to the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. And I was talking to him earlier, and he was mentioning that he spent 15 years in San Francisco. And he also mentioned to me there is a brand new temple that has come in San Francisco, which we'll hopefully have the opportunity to see next March. So it has been really, it has come from the very well-known, Swami Prabodhananda, a senior monk, and as well as he has been to India, taken several trips, and he has come to Washington, D.C., originally from what I learned from him for a couple of weeks, and then he has now stayed for a couple of years, and so hopefully we will have him for many years, in terms of sharing the teaching of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda and all of that. So with that, let me invite Swami Chidbrahmananda to give his keynote address.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I got a different tablet today, so I'm to figure out how it works. Most embarrassing, well, actually one of my most embarrassing moments, I was giving a lecture in the temple in Hollywood, and the machine wouldn't turn on. I was sitting there, all my notes and everything were there, and I was like, ah! And someone yelled from the audience, use paper! And I thought, oh, the truth of these things, the truth of these things. Well, good morning. It's a great honor for me to be here this morning, and especially to be able to sit on this panel with such distinguished academics and accomplished people. I find myself in this very strange position quite frequently these days, and I always just look at Mother and kind of shrug my shoulders whenever I end up in a position like this. I'm not a scholar. I have no letters anywhere after my name, only in the middle of it. And I keep finding myself in these positions, and I always have to remind people that I'm not a guru, I'm not a teacher, I'm a cheerleader, really. And even in this topic this morning, Mother Nature and the state of our world and being responsible and cleaning up our mess after we're finished with it, even in this, I'm a big cheerleader and really on the side of each of us as we try and build a life that manifests more purely in this world. I always like to start with a poem by Hafiz, mostly because most of this life for me started with Hafiz. As you can see, my book is now in many different pieces. This one's called All the Hemispheres. Leave the familiar for a while. Let your senses and bodies stretch out like a welcomed season onto the meadows and the shores and the hills. Open up to the roof. Make a new watermark on your excitement and love. Like a blooming night flower, bestow your vital fragrance of happiness and giving upon our intimate assembly. Change rooms in your mind for a day. All the hemispheres in existence lie beside an equator in your heart. Greet yourself in your 1,000 other forms as you mount the hidden tide and travel back home. All the hemispheres in heaven are sitting around a fire chatting while stitching themselves together into a great circle inside of you. Vivekananda first came to this country about almost 120 years ago, I guess 120 some odd years ago. And in his first address, he said that the first message that he wanted the world to hear, that he wanted the West to hear, was this underlying unity of the soul, this oneness of all things. He says in his complete works, in this universe, Brahma or Hiranyagarbha or the cosmic Mahat first manifested himself as name and then as form, as this universe. All this expressed sensible universe is the form behind which stands the eternal inexpressible Svota, the manifester as logos or word. This eternal Svota, the essential eternal material of all ideas or names, is the power through which the Lord creates the universe. Nay, the Lord first becomes conditioned as the Spota, and then evolves himself out as the yet more concrete, sensible universe. This Spota has one word as its only possible symbol, and this is the Om. So we're going to start from that place this morning, this idea of oneness, that all of us are sitting in the middle of the divine, that everything by its nature is holy and sacred, perfect and eternal. Many of its forms, always changing, coming and going, never to be frozen or caught or trapped, this eternal divinity that we live in. And to approach it like that, to understand that this world, the nature of this world, of all of nature, all that we experience, all that we see, is God, is the divine. It's the basis for Swamiji saying to us, stop seeking God, stop looking for God, and see God. You have never seen anything but the divine. So appreciate that and see it. He goes on to say, it's easy for men to think that they can understand anything, but when it comes to practical experience, they find that abstract ideas are often very hard to comprehend. Therefore, symbols are of great help, and we cannot dispense with the symbolical method of putting things before us. From time immemorial, symbols have been used by all kinds of religions. In one sense, we cannot think but in symbols, words themselves, symbols of thought. In another sense, everything in the universe may be looked upon as a symbol. The whole universe is a symbol, and God is the essence behind it all. So this divinity is part and parcel. None of us can be separated from it. None of us as individuals can be separated out from it. So the health of the world in a sense, in a very true sense, is the health of our own selves, the health of our own being. And when we begin to approach troubles and problems like we are in this world now, especially with this climate change, with the worldwide pollution, with the population issues, we always need to approach it with that kind of reverence and that kind of respect, that it's a part of ourselves that we're approaching, that its nature is divine, that its nature is love, that it is an unfolding symbol of that eternal divinity which brings us together, which is the unity that will ultimately bring us all together. It is the core in us that teaches us love for each other. It's the core in us that teaches us that responsibility for each other, that compassion for each other, that giving for each other, that extends not just from this body to another body, but from this body to all the beings, this body to all the things in the world, to place that consciousness all around us, to recognize it, to see God in all things and every one. Sri Ramakrishna used to love to tell that story of the child, when he plays and the leaf is blowing, and he tells the leaf, "Be quiet, sit still." He says, in childhood we naturally see consciousness in everything. We naturally understand that the world is alive around us and part and parcel of us. And he encourages us to do the same, to live that way even still, to recognize this intimate relationship, this intimate dance. Ramakrishna tells a great story. Actually, it's not a story, it's an account. He said there's a sadhu in Rishikesh, that village at the foot of the Himalayas in India, where the Ganga comes down out of the mountains. He said there's a sadhu in Rishikesh who gets up early in the morning and stands near a great waterfall. He looks at it the whole day and says to God, "Ah, you have done well. Well done. How amazing." He doesn't practice any other form of japa or austerity. At night he returns to his hut. What need is there even to bother one's head about whether God is formless or has a form? It is enough for a man to pray to him alone in solitude, weeping, "O God, reveal yourself to me as you are." God is both inside and outside. It is he who dwells inside us. Therefore the Vedas say, "Tattvamasi," thou art that. God is also outside us. He appears manifold through Maya, but in reality he alone exists. Therefore, before describing the various names and forms of God, one should say, Om Tat Sat, Om, that alone is reality. So we see Ramakrishna, one of the great sages who realized God, who saw God and understood the divine as much as the divine can be grasped or understood. And he points out this practice that from this world, this world can be a mansion of mirth, that if you see it as God, it unfolds as God. If you see it as intimate, it unfolds as intimate. If you look for God in it, you will see him or her reflected back to you in it. That it's a constant dance, that your day is an ongoing prayer, an ongoing interaction with this divinity, with this love. So through these scriptures, we see the basis upon which we can build anything that we want to do, or anything that we're going to construct in our life, any problem that we're going to undertake, that we approach it with this oneness idea, with this idea of an inherent respect and love for everything around us, that we care about the environment because it is divine. We care about the environment because God is everywhere present and always perfect. We care about the world we live in because it's a part of ourselves. We cannot wound a part of the world without wounding our own heart. And we don't see it that way because we've forgotten, because we get caught up in our day-to-day. We get caught up in our interactions, and it covers that understanding. We become unconscious of these things. So when we approach these problems, we open up first to this unity and to this divinity. Open up first to Mother, the motherhood of this world. He says that this world is full of symbols, that everything here can teach, that everything can be learned from. Ramakrishna walked through a day and he saw and experienced God speaking with him through a multitude of things. He went to a circus and saw a woman standing on the back of a horse, jumping through hoops. And he learned the lesson of how almost anything could be accomplished by one who focuses and practices and works hard. He saw the rivers all flowing to the ocean, and he saw the oneness of all religions, of all thought, of all mankind, that through our lives we are all finding our way back to that source, all finding our way back to that highest ideal. He saw the fish trapped in a net, and he understood the nature of this ignorance that all of us get caught up in, this bondage of thinking that we're small bodies and minds, that we've particularized God and particularized our expressions of love, so that when looked from the other side, they appear as hate, they appear as evil. But from the side that we act on, it appears to us as love and as good. And he encourages us then to break out of that net, to not be bound by that particular, to always broaden your mind and look at the universal, understand the impact of all things together and see God in them. It is said, by Vivekananda, he says, it is said that by some, that selfishness is the only motive power in regard to all human activities. That also is love, lowered by being particularized. When I think of myself as comprehending the universal, there can surely be no selfishness in me. But when I, by mistake, think that I am a little something, my love becomes particularized and narrowed. The mistake consists in making the sphere of love narrow and contracted. All things in the universe are of divine origin and deserve to be loved. It has, however, to be borne in mind that the love of the whole includes the love of the parts. This whole is the God of the bhaktas, the devotees, and all the other gods, fathers in heaven, or rulers, or creators. All these theories and doctrines and books have no purpose and no meaning for the devotee of the divine, seeing that they have, through their supreme love and devotion, risen above all of these things altogether. When your heart is purified, when your heart is cleansed and filled to the brim with the divine nectar of love, all other ideas of God become simply puerile and are rejected as being inadequate or unworthy. Such is indeed the power of the Parabhakti, or the supreme love. The perfected devotee no more goes to see God in temples and churches. He knows no place where he will not find him. He finds him in the temple as well as out of the temple. He finds them in the saint's saintliness as well as in the wicked man's wickedness, because he has him already seated in glory in his own heart, as the one almighty, inextinguishable light of love, which is ever shining and eternally present. So he shows us that this idea that certainly Western psychology is built on, that selfishness or self-interest is the only motive in the world. And he says that's true, but to call something selfish is not to understand the whole picture. Selfishness is really just particularized love. It's a narrow expression of love. And it's that narrow expression, that narrow content of mind or projection of mind that gets us into our trouble. It's what causes us to ruin a planet, as it were. It's what causes us to pollute without discrimination and without understanding. Because we bring our minds down to the particular and we don't think about the effect on the whole picture. We keep the mind narrowed. We keep it on the specifics. So we see those things. He says our duty to others means helping others, doing good to the world. Why should we do good to the world? Well, apparently to help the world. But really, it is to help ourselves. We should always try to help the world, and that should be the highest motive in us. But if we consider well, we will find that the world does not require our help at all. The world is not made that you or I should come and help it. The only help is that we get moral exercise. The world is neither good nor evil. Each man manufactures a world for himself. So you live in this world, and each one of us lives in our own world. And that world will appear to you as you are. If it's full of troubles, it's because you're part of the problems. You're part of the troubles. You see the troubles. When you become part of the solution, you begin to see solutions. You know, I was thinking on the way over here, my first challenge for myself as I approached this, I was like, wow, here I am driving to a climate discussion in my own car, or in the center's car, no other passengers. And I wondered about that. I thought, wow, that's something to think about. That's something to consider. In my world, in my view, I didn't even consider any other options for getting here this morning, or think about getting anybody a ride. And that's how this world is going to change. It's not by us getting out and changing other people's ideas and getting out and changing other people's opinions. It's about us becoming in line with our own ideals and our own opinions. That if we believe this is important, that it needs to reflect in our life. It needs to reflect in what we throw away and what we don't throw away. It needs to reflect in how much effort we put forward to recycling things. To not buying new things that we don't need, in renewing old things that we were going to get rid of instead of repairing or fixing. And in this, certainly, when I got the flyer for this discussion, India does have a great deal to teach us in that respect. I read there's a website where you go in and you type in, you answer a lot of questions about your lifestyle, and then it goes and tells you how many planets would be necessary if everybody on the planet lived at that level, lived at the level that you're living at. And I'm a sannyasin, and so I thought, I should do pretty good on this. So I went through and I answered these questions, went through there, and at the end it said it would take 4.7 planets to maintain everybody at my lifestyle. And I was like, oh my God, that's horrible. And so I read further down in the article, and it took different countries around the world and was kind of comparing them. And India, it was wonderful. India, if everybody undertook the lifestyle of the average person in India, you only needed 0.7 worlds to support that life. And I thought about that. I was like, wow, that's a big jump for me to go from 4.7 planets to 0.7 planets. It's like time for me to sit down and think. And that's the challenge. This world is our own. This universe is your own. How do you want it to be? How do you want it to be if you have children, when you hand it off to them, when you have to move on? How do we live? This world is God. It is our divinity. It is an expression of love. And our worship of it is not just in temples. It's not going through just empty rituals of exercise. It's going out and doing something to make this world a better place. Sure, make an offering in the temple. That's very nice. It's wonderful. But take food down to the homeless shelter. That is worship of God and man. And that's Swami Vivekananda's huge message to all of us, is to serve God in the world around us, to take care of one another as worship, to see that divinity in each other and respect each other from that place. Everybody starts worthy of love, worthy of acceptance, worthy of our heart. And so to live accordingly in that way. Say this misery that I am suffering is of my own doing, and that very thing proves that it will have to be undone by me alone. That which I created I can demolish. That which is created by someone else I shall never be able to destroy. Therefore stand up, be bold, be strong. Take the whole responsibility on your own shoulders and know that you are the creators of your own destiny. All the strength and success you want is within yourself. So when we approach these problems, we can't begin by blaming others. We can't go along and say, oh, these people did that, or these people are doing that, or this corporation's doing this. If we keep our eyes on what other people are doing, we don't have the power or the authority to affect those things. So all you do is it builds up an anger inside, it builds up a resentment inside, it builds up a division inside, it puts everything farther away from you, and the world cannot change. Vivekananda is saying, no, take responsibility. Say that it's all your fault. Regardless of whether it is or not, have that attitude. And that empowers you then to be able to do something about it. You have things in your life that are within your purveyance, that are yours to take care of, that are in your power to manage. How many people did you bring in your car here this morning? Did you shop for a car that was healthy for the environment? Do you normally take public transportation? Do you normally divide your stuff into recyclables and into trash? All these simple forms of worship and ritual that we never think about, that we never consider as part of our religion, part of our prayer, part of our being alive. But that's the important thing that Vivekananda was trying to tell us in this unity, that your very life is your prayer. And the only way things change is through prayer. Not muttering something in your mind in wishful thinking, but by changing a habit in your life as worship to God. By doing what is best for the whole and not just for the particular. By keeping an eye and a respect for your neighbor awake and opened and looking constantly for a means to serve and a means to give. He says, never mind your failures. You know, the fact that we have to have a conference like this is a sign of failure. You know, we've gone down part way down a path that's proving unsustainable, that we can't do this as a whole. So we're having to stop and reconsider. And he says, don't mind your failures. Don't let this get you down. Don't feel defeated by this because it's a worldwide problem. It's a global problem. It's huge. It's so big. It's beyond me. No, it's completely within your power to change this. I remember one time I was standing in the kitchen in San Francisco, and I was a newbie. I was brand new in the monastery, and I didn't approve of the way it was being run at all, and thought that I had quite a few ideas that would make it much better. And I went on a rant for a good 30 minutes to this very old devotee. Quite embarrassing to think about at this time. I was just red in my face and shaking, just complaining about everything. And after I had made all these complaints about how wrong everything was being run, he said to me, yes, that's probably all true, but what do boundary disputes have to do with a field hand? At first I was very offended by that. You know, at first I thought, what are you talking about, a field hand? What do you mean? And I thought deeply about it, one, because I had a great deal of respect for him, and two, because I didn't expect that answer. But see, I had put my eyes on things that I couldn't change. I had put my eyes on things that I wasn't happy with, that were beyond my boundary, that I couldn't affect. And what was it doing to me? It was making me angry. It was making me feel frustrated. It was making me uptight. Clearly, I had just ranted for 20 minutes. After that, I learned. I started to think, wow, I think I've run my whole life like that. I'm always looking over the fence at what's happening everywhere else and getting upset with it and getting frustrated with it. You know, this thing going on in Iraq and this thing going on in Afghanistan and this thing happening in Venezuela, you know, so that I get this sense of disempowerment. And so at that time I thought, no, I need to lower my eyes here, bring it back down. What has Mother given me to be responsible for? And in those days it was quite simple. It's actually simple these days too, but in those days it was washing dishes. It was keeping the monastery clean. It was taking care of the temple gardens, growing the flowers for worship. And I decided at that time, that's my world. That is what Mother has given me to be responsible for. So I will wash my dishes excellently. That will be my worship. I will take care of this garden excellently. That is my worship. And so in this global problem of climate change and global warming and pollution and these terrible things, if you look at it on that broad scale, you're just going to feel disempowered. You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel angry. Bring it down to the things that Mother has made you responsible for, and make sure that you are implementing the values that you are saying that you have by being here today in your day-to-day, that your forms of worship reflect the ideals of your heart and of your mind, that your prayers aren't just verbal mutterings of an ideal, but they're prayers of action, that you pick up a piece of trash and put it in the trash can. That's a prayer for a clean world. That you recycle a can, that's a prayer for a renewable world. That you wash out a plastic bag and actually have a place to dry it, that's a prayer for a clean world, for a world that we can all share, that's sustainable. Coming to a place like this is a prayer for unity and a prayer for working together, for spreading these ideals and encouraging one another by having this form of love. He says, don't look back, forward. Forward with infinite energy, forward with infinite enthusiasm, infinite daring, infinite patience. Then alone can great deeds be accomplished.
Thank you so much. You know, in terms of, I think he did keep the time, you know, on his mind as he was doing it. So thank you very much. It's probably, they can probably hear me. But let me take the opportunity to